Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing the Court Challenges Program, which is a program that gives taxpayer money to social justice activists to sue the government. Professor Alford, you and Professor Snow have written this report where you've gone through and determined which cases this program actually funded. But as we were discussing in the last segment, it's not just as easy as, cracking open the annual report and saying, oh, here's the list of the cases. How did you actually figure out which cases were getting funding, and how hard was that to do?
It's very difficult with respect to interveners. That required going and looking on the court's docket and looking at various memoranda filed on the court's website, and then trying to track the language that's revealed in these anonymized or quasi-anonymized surveys that the program itself puts out. But we were in fact able to find out which were in fact funding parties. And some of those were quite shocking insofar as the anonymous or anonymized report doesn't really give you a good indication of how controversial the matter actually is.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the cases that you found. Professor Snow, maybe you could give me three examples of funded cases that really stood out to you as surprising that the government would fund a case like this, and something taxpayers might not want their tax dollars going towards.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So, I mean, the first one, and the one that maybe has gotten the most news, both from this report and Blacklock's reporters' excellent reporting, is that the Court Challenges Program funded two interventions in the greenhouse gases reference. So, this was the provincial challenge to the federal Trudeau government's climate change plans, and this was or policy, I should say. And this is a federalism case. This is about, do they have the jurisdiction, or does the provinces have jurisdiction? It's not a charter case at all. And so we had to sort of glean that presumably some intervener was making some argument related to rights. And just logic, it defies logic to suggest that there would be a rights-based argument that this program or policy shouldn't exist. And so we surmise, and the CCP seems to have confirmed in correspondence with Blacklock's reporting, that they funded interveners making arguments in favor of the government's existing legislation. Another example and I might be mispronouncing the name, and I apologize, the Tepamboa case, where the Court Challenges Program funded the party to the case. And these were two individuals who were spouses who had been denied entry in or denied refugee status in Canada because it was found by the Immigration Refugee Board that they are likely have to committed or contributed to crimes against humanity while part of Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe national army. And so, I mean, that's the most shocking one, right? And the argument is sort of, in that case, it went to the federal court. This case ended up losing and being denied appeal at the Supreme Court
I, I,
of
I just
Canada.
want to articulate what you said. So the government is trying to deport an individual who is alleged to have committed crimes against humanity in Zimbabwe. And the government's position is these people should be removed from our country. But then the government funded a group to support them, arguing that they should stay. Is that what the case is?
Yes, I mean, in a few words, yes. There is sort of a technical legal argument that this came down to an interpretation of how to interpret this statute regarding refugee protection, and that the Supreme Court had issued a new decision, and therefore that had changed the jurisprudence, and now these people ought to be considered. The courts did not agree with that at every level. But yes, effectively, the government is saying these two people who were already found likely to have contributed to crimes against humanity as part of the Zimbabwe National Army, we're going to fund their litigation when they try and change this Immigration and Refugee Board's mind and ultimately become refugees in Canada. And they were coming from the United States. Complicated decision. But yeah, so that you asked for three cases. I don't know if we want to move to
Yeah,
Professor Alford, but those are the two that stick out in my mind the most.
yeah, and before we go to the next to your examples, Professor Alford, maybe you could tell me about the ethical question of the government funding an intervener in support of the government's case. I mean, I have questions about that being ethical. It's sort of like using taxpayer dollars to pad the government's own case. Just 30 seconds, briefly, what your thoughts are.
I guess that's the problem is that you see it as vouching. The notion is, well, we're not quite sympathetic enough to make this argument, but we'll fund someone or some organization that has a very kind of good public image to essentially to articulate arguments that track our own. Uh, there's a real problem there with kind of transparency and also with how courts are being treated, whereby you're getting an argument smuggled in by somebody who might not be held to account the same way that the government is.
Yeah, and all at taxpayer expense. We've got to go to commercial break now, but we'll continue this when we come back.